Brandon Inniss, number 3 wide receiver per 247 Sports, American Heritage High School, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, 6 foot, 190, currently committed to the Ohio State, going to play for Brian Hartline if he still is there. Guys, Inniss, very unique amongst this group because he played everything for this offense. He was playing quarterback, he was playing receiver, basically however they could get him the football, they were asking him to do pretty much everything to make all the big plays for this team. And I mentioned earlier, you're watching some of these guys and it's hard to really figure out like how good are they with the arm talent that they're getting, because he was basically the best arm in this offense when he was playing receiver. There were instances where he had to come back to the football. Now that didn't matter for Inniss because this guy, the definition that just popped up right in my head as soon as I was watching him, this is a pure yak guy. This is a yards after catch, slippery, hard to tackle, fights for extra yards. You give him a screen, you give him a short pass, he's going to pick up those extra yards and do whatever it takes to get them. And it makes sense because he's playing quarterback and he's almost a wildcat quarterback the way that he's utilized for his team. Do you guys get the same sense there? Ryan, let's head to you first on this one, that like he's just a pure guy that is going to get yards any way that he can.
See, Joe, when I played football, I can't relate to this, but this kid has probably just been the best athlete on the field his entire life. Like he's just that guy. And it's you see it, him running wildcat and him running just anything to get him the football in the air. I mean, it's incredible to watch. And one thing I would say to Matt's point when we started the show, where he said, like, the quarterbacks that maybe don't have as much, if you're not playing with a quarterback with as much talent or the best arm, it actually can help you in a lot of ways. And I think that Brandon Inniss is one of those, because you see his clips of wide receiver where he's only 6 foot, 190 pounds. He's not the biggest guy that we're talking about today, but he attacks the football in the air and has great body control through contact. So this kid's a really good athlete just all the way around. I think he's quick twitch. I think he has good straight line speed. I think he's springy and he's competitive, I think is one of the biggest things that I love to see about him. And it just exudes confidence, Matt. Like it's one of those things where, like, I talk about people about this all the time. It's like some wide receivers, you can't really quantify it with a 40 time or a vertical leap all the time, but some of them are just dogs, man. Like they just have that alpha to them. Right. And this is what I see with Brandon Inniss. Like this kid, every time the ball's in the air, he thinks he deserves to have that football. And that's one thing I love about his game.
Yeah, I wish that he had like a play where he just dropped back and threw it as high as he could and then ran underneath and got it, like you see on social media, where the guys are running through the house and catching their own pass. Because like that's just what he reminds me. He's just like that. He's an ultimate athlete. He really is. He does a little bit of everything really well. There's really no like huge flaws to his game. I think the only flaw to his game really is the fact that he's in an offense that doesn't allow him to actually get experience or valuable experience at, running routes versus different looks and actually learning how to create separation consistently, because he's just in a situation where he's either at quarterback running the football, at quarterback throwing it, and throwing it really well, actually. And then when he's running routes, he's really asked to do very simple things. He's receiver screens, go routes, and posts. And a lot of those times, like, he does a good job of adjusting to the football. He makes a lot of plays. He runs well. He runs tough as well, too. His change of direction, I think, is pretty elite, too. And I think, Ohio State is just getting one of those football players that they know is no matter what, he is going to be someone that, brings a lot to the table. And that'll be just the big question mark for him, is just kind of where he fits into their program going forward because of, the multitude of abilities that he has.
Joe, I don't know if you've seen him that much, but he actually reminds me of one player that Ohio State has right now, in Emeka Egbuka.
Oh, I like
they
that.
Remind me a lot of one another. I mean, he's not quite as big as Emeka, but Emeka's got that body type where you say, like, he can line up pretty much anywhere that he wants, but like the yak ability, the strength that he has, it's uncommon for a guy his size. So I think that he fits perfectly in Ohio State, because I think he actually is pretty similar to a guy that plays for Ohio State right this second, if I'm being honest.
I need to force a comp, Ryan. So I need your thoughts on this. So I was trying to think of, like,
we should only get like a limit too on every show, like a force comps. Just like we should do something like that.
You get a quote of 2 every episode.
Or the better way is if you force one, you're not allowed to make another comp for the rest of the show. I think
I like that.
Okay, all right. And if you miss, then you don't get any, for the rest of the show.
All right.
Yes.
I like that. And both of you guys can help decide if this one's a miss. So I was thinking of who in the NFL was notoriously a yak guy and who just did so well after the catch. And immediately popped in my head, T.Y. Hilton is like that guy who just always was really great in yak. You guys don't like that comparison?
I hated that yak. I hated that one. I hate that comp. I hated it.
Matt, you
it didn't bother me. No, it didn't bother me as much. I was reacting more to Ryan's reaction, which was pretty funny. Immediately, just like so disappointed in you.
Yeah, I disappoint Ryan. The one question I wanted to ask with him though, and you guys were hitting on it, where because he's asked to do so many different things, he doesn't really have the same ability that these other guys do to develop into being a wide receiver. He's an athlete on the field for this team, and he's a little bit behind because of that. So for that reasoning, Matt, I want to ask you first from your playing days, like how much does this like slow down that process for him being ready to contribute and start, that he's a little bit less refined, but is currently just the most athletic guy in the field before he heads to a program where he's not going to be the most athletic guy in the field?
Yeah, I mean, I think the main thing is that when he goes to Ohio State, he's going to be in a room full of players that are very comfortable at the receiver position and have been playing receiver for the majority of their lives. So I think he's going to have a lot of people where he is just naturally going to be able to absorb a lot of information from by watching film, by getting those practice reps, right? By being around them, you know, just again, like we mentioned in the QB thing, like I naturally learned a lot of lessons at quarterback just by sitting at my dining room table, you know, with my family, you know, or just sitting around and watching Sunday Night Football with my father and my brother when I was younger. Not because I actually wanted to be a quarterback when I was 7, but just being there helped me, you know. And that's what I think is going to happen with him too. He's going to be in a room where they've had a ton of fantastic receivers over the past 7 or 8 years. They've become somewhat of a receiver U type of location. And I think he's going to be able to go back, look at that inventory and archive of film, watch what these great football players did, where they started, where they're going, you know, where they're at now. And I think, you know, the biggest thing is that he's a player that obviously can do a lot of things really well. And when you can do a lot of things really well, it's kind of like Mark Wahlberg and the other guys, you know, when you can imitate really well as an athlete, it gives you a tremendous advantage to learn really, really fast. And clearly he can imitate playing a running back. He can imitate playing a quarterback. He can imitate playing a receiver. So I think he has a lot of upside to him as a football player. The problem is that Ohio State usually has like 4 or 5 of these guys every year. So that'll be his biggest issue, is just fighting for playing time, because there's a lot of good football players on that team.
I'll say this, Joe. One thing that I think Ohio State's done a really great job on, because I agree with everything that Matt just said, and I would say this too. It's the fact that Brandon Inniss does have all those traits where you say he can learn those things, right? Like the nuances of the position. He's going to be working with, you know, maybe the best wide receiver coach in college football right now in Brian Hartline. Yeah. Like he's to that point. And one thing that they've done, in my opinion, over the last few years is they've continued to restock that room, but you always see them be willing to departmentalize the players and get them on the field to be successful in a certain way, right? Like none of those players, whether you're talking about Garrett Wilson or Jackson Smith-Njigba or Emeka Egbuka or Marvin Harrison Jr., like none of them put up these stupid volume getting numbers as freshmen, but they all played a little bit, right? Like they all kind of had their role in the offense. So while I agree that I don't think Brent Inniss is going to come in and be the volume getter in the passing attack, because it's just going to be an overpopulated room, I think that we have seen with what Ryan Day and Brian Hartline can do as developers and as play callers, that they can see what Brandon Inniss does well, and they can get him on the field and ask him to do things that he's comfortable with early while he's continuing to round out his game. So again, I mean, if I'm a wide receiver, the question is the question isn't why would you go to Ohio State? The question is, like, at this point, why wouldn't you go to Ohio State? They're going to develop you into a potential first round pick, and you're working with one of the best wide receiver coaches in college football, one of the best play callers in college football. Like, it's just a no-brainer at this point.
Yeah, it's a great point. And I think part of it too is they're getting guys that are superstars right away that will make an impact right away. And I think to protect your room, to add to what you're saying, you need to get guys like Brandon to kind of fill that void, so you don't have these huge gaps between years where you don't have anybody. So he is somebody that, like, hey, let's bring him in. Maybe you redshirt him. you know, you give him a year or two to kind of learn and get adjusted to the game. And then by his second or third year, he is that savage that they need him to be, that's out there winning one-on-one matchups consistently.
100%.